Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so now I think there are about how many have now joined, ma?
51, ma'am.
Okay, that's perfect. We'll start with whoever is available. Okay, so now,
Okay, ma'am.
good evening, dear students. It gives me great pleasure and pride in meeting you from my own parent college and talking to you on a subject which is very dear to my heart. But believe me, this ureteric injuries came during my final MBBS exam and my DGO exam as well as in my MD exam. So it's such a very important topic, both for theory as well as in your day-to-day practice throughout your life. So, okay. So what you need to remember about the urinary tract injuries is this slide, no, the Ardhanarishwarar. You might be wondering why I have put this slide. This slide is to tell you that the ureter, the bladder are very closely related to the uterus and the cervix. That is the intimate anatomy. So that one point I wanted you to remember. They are by nature, by anatomy, they are very close to each other. So the urinary tract injuries complicate approximately 1% of all gynec procedures with the ratio of 5 bladder injuries to each ureteric injury. And urinary tract injuries occur in about 0.28% of all cesarean deliveries with a threefold risk in repeat cesarean delivery. And the rate of ureteric injury is less than 1.1% during cesarean delivery. So what you need to remember is bladder and ureteric injuries are common in gynecological practice, with the main reason being their anatomical proximity. And as I told you, now with the increasing number of cesarean sections, you can have an increasing number of injuries. So what is the iatrogenic bladder injury? One which happens while we are operating, inadvertently it happens. So it's a definite incision or laceration in the bladder wall which needs to be repaired. The incidence is 1.4 per thousand LSES. It's usually on the posterior wall or dome, but can sometimes be difficult to expose. So I put that one picture to show that it is closely related. Again, if you can see my, I'll just try to bring that pointer. See, can you see? This is the uterus and this is the bladder. So this bladder will be very closely related. So you have to push the bladder from this, only then you will be able to do a cesarean. And if you're going to do a hysterectomy, you have to push it completely. Otherwise, you will have injury. Similarly, the ureters will be closely related. So the anatomic proximity of the reproductive and the lower urinary tract predisposes them to iatrogenic trauma during the OBGYN surgery. So what are the risk factors? The number one risk factor in bladder injury will be a previous cesarean or a previous hysterectomy. So anybody coming to you with previous 1 LSES, previous 2 or a previous 3, while you counsel them, you need to tell them about the possibility of a bladder injury. Similarly, in placental abnormalities, in placenta previa, percurita, etc., again, there is an increased incidence of bladder injuries. Obstructed labor, or whether there is a bladder overdistension, infection, and endometriosis. Endometriosis, usually there is an increased incidence of a ureteric injury. So now, why does, I was telling you, previous cesarean, you have an increased incidence of bladder injury. Why do they occur? I showed you the picture where the bladder and the uterus are closely related. So not only that, in previous cesarean, dense adhesions formed between the bladder and the lower abdomen, as well as the lower uterine segment, were 5 to 6 times more prone to bladder injury. And because they are stuck, those adhesions may lead to an inadvertent entry into the bladder during the dissection from the lower uterine segment. You remember the picture where I showed you how the uterus is closely related. So while they try to push it down, it's an iatrogenic injury or an inadvertent. No surgeon goes with a knife to cut the bladder or the ureter. So what is more important is urgent abrupt, stressful nature of the surgery may be more responsible rather than the scar tissue from surgery. And when you compare the number of bladder injuries in emergency versus elective cesarean, the number of injuries are more in emergency cesarean. For example, if they are taking up the patient for cesarean with a fetal heart rate of say only 90 to 100, or it's a thick meconium stain, like there may be an anxiety in delivering the baby soon. And supposing I had written obstructed labor as one factor. So that means the head is jammed down, and this is performed very late in labor, and because of all this the bladder is drawn up and there is a distorted anatomy. So whenever there is bladder or ureteric injury, this distorted anatomy is one important reason. Second, another thing is, I was talking, one, I talked about previous cesareans, then emergency, late in labor with obstruction, etc. Another important cause of bladder injury is placental abnormalities. Whenever you're dealing a placenta previa or a perquita, especially in a patient with previous cesareans, you have to be bothered. You have to mentally be ready to take care of a bladder injury, to prevent, recognize, and treat. Again, here this may be an emergency nature, and the lower uterine segment is markedly enlarged and vascular with distortion of the normal anatomy and tissue planes. If there is a placenta accreta or perquita, you can call a urologist. So again, to summarize, if you're thinking of bladder injury, the more common causes are multiple previous cesareans, late in labor, obstructed labor, or placental abnormalities. These are the more important causes. So how do they happen? The adhesions from the previous surgery may pull the bladder to a more superior location than anticipated. Adhesion is one enemy. Another enemy is endometriosis. Endometriosis and pelvic inflammatory disease all create adhesions, and they alter the tissue planes, make it a difficult situation for the surgeon. So when the bladder is stuck to the lower uterine segment, you have to remember this point. Using sharp dissection when there are altered tissue planes prevents devascularization, laceration, and suturing into the bladder musculature. Here, this point, that is using sharp dissection, is a keyword. Normally, we even use a gauze to push the bladder. But in a case of a previous cesarean or where there is morbid adhesion, don't use a gauze dissection. Use sharp dissection. It is better that some fibers of the lower uterine segment go into the bladder rather than some fibers of the bladder going into the lower uterine segment. So this word prevention, sharp dissection, you have to remember. Using sharp swab pusher with pressure will result in tearing at the site of least resistance, which may be the bladder rather than the facial tissue plane. And in case you're a little doubtful, there will be a Foley catheter in every pelvic surgery or a cesarean. You can fill the bladder with saline, water, or methylene blue so that on-table recognition would be easy. When there is a bladder injury, especially intraoperative injury, we don't go in for investigations like cystography, ultrasound, CT, etc. It is mostly a clinical diagnosis. So how will you diagnose a bladder injury? Remember, diagnosing a bladder injury is an intraoperative diagnosis. And visual inspection, just looking at, is the most reliable method of assessing bladder integrity and often the only diagnostic mode available. So we tell the Foley looks at us open. If you see properly, you will see that yellow catheter looking at us and say, hi, how are you? So you can see the Foley inside. You can see a gush of urine in the field, or the catheter which you have put in, there can be a blood-stained urine. Or suddenly you'll be seeing there's a lot more of bleeding from the wound. That is because the bleeding is getting mixed with the urine. The key point is, whenever you have a doubt of a bladder injury, please put in methylene blue. You put in a dilute methylene blue around 200 to 300 ml, and if there is nothing coming inside your field, you can be sure that there is no bladder injury. It's better to see. And bladder injury usually is not missed. It's an intraoperative diagnosis. It is only the ureteric injuries that world over, only 1/3 is recognized on table, 2/3 are missed. So there is a bladder injury. Generally what happens, everybody gets worried. So as a surgeon obstetrician, you feel very bad that you have opened the bladder or injured. But what you need to understand is you must remain cool and not panic. You must assess the defect or the extent, and you should know when to call a urologist or when you can suture it yourself. Maybe when you go up the ladder, you will be able to suture it yourself. Whereas when you need to call a urologist is when it's a large defect extending deep into the posterior bladder wall or involving the trigone. The types of injury can be a cutting injury, crushing, transection, or laceration. A word about transvesical delivery. We have seen in many cases in patients with 3 or 4 cesareans, when the bladder has been totally adherent, we have seen people delivering the baby through the bladder. That is, an incision has been made on the anterior wall of the bladder, posterior wall of the bladder, on the uterus, and then the baby is delivered. That's called a transvesical delivery, which needs to be tackled and carefully repaired. And before you close the bladder, we need to make out whether all the edges are well made out and whether the bladder needs to be mobilized for good closure. The bladder is very adherent. You may not be able to mobilize. You need to call for help. But if you think you can close it yourself, please look inside whether you're able to see the ureters. So now what will you do? If it is a small, less than 1 centimeter, you can even put a purse string suture, 2-layered. The first layer putting the mucosa and the muscularis, and the second layer the muscularis and the serosa. There is no need of a SPC or a suprapubic catheter. But supposing it is a very big one, I just put in 2 fingers and I have stretched the bladder. Only then I will be able to see whether the ureteric orifice is seen or not. We should not, supposing the bladder defect is there on the edge, towards one end of the defect, the ureteric orifice is there, you must not suture it and convert a bladder injury into both a bladder injury and a ureteric injury. Okay, can you see the injured site? And to see, if I will just show you. See, this is the ureteric orifice. Ureteric infant feeding put I have put through both the ureteric orifice, showing that the ureteric orifices are normal, only the bladder needs to be sutured. So you can see the urethral foley. This is the urethral foley, and from above we try to put an SPC. And if it is in more than 1 centimeter, if you can remember, I will read the whole thing, but ultimately what you should remember is the bladder should be mobilized to ensure a tension-free suturing. Can you hear, ma? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Audible.
So, very good. Thank you, ma. So, you need to put a 2-layered suture. The first layer using 3-0 delayed absorbable suture. So, the inner aspect, you will have the mucosa and the muscularis in the first layer. You can even put methylene blue at that point of time, or you can put both the layers and then do. So, what you need to remember is you will suture the bladder in 2 layers in a watertight anastomosis using delayed absorbable. You don't use non-absorbable because you are worried about forming calculi, granuloma, or an income. So what do? You suture a bladder in 2 layers using delayed absorbable suture material. And what is the duration you would put the catheter? The books say in the dome, it's enough to put for 4 to 7 days, and in the dependent portion, you put for 7 to 14 days. But we all generally prefer to put for 14 days because we want the bladder to heal completely. We don't want any fistula formation. So I prefer to put the catheter for 14 days. You can always say, yes, our institutional policy, we put for 14 days. And what is the need for SPC? What is SPC? SPC is a suprapubic catheter. One catheter I showed you was draining through the urethra. The other one we put it on abdomen because this is an bladder which has been sutured. So there can be microclots, and these clots can block the Foley eye. If it blocks the Foley, the bladder would get distended and the suture may get compromised. So to avoid that, you put in another SPC catheter, something like an insurance, you put in another catheter and you ensure that there is continuous drainage of the urine, and you don't want the bladder to get distended. Okay, if it's a very small injury, we need not put an SPC. Otherwise, when in doubt, it's better to put an SPC. Repair at primary surgery. You have opened a bladder inadvertently. I told you, remember, most of the bladder injuries are recognized on the table. And so it is easy to repair that. I told you, simple 2-layered suture. It is more successful, less morbid for the patient, and advantages for the surgeon from the legal point of view. Our the current scenario, we have a lot of litigations. So imagine a patient where there's a bladder injury, you sutured and that's become all right. It's easy to face them rather than you miss a bladder injury, recognize later and suture. So it's better to visualize if there's any bladder injury. Another thing, what next is a ureteric injury. A significant ureteric injury is defined as any recognized or unrecognized ureteral trauma that prevents it from functioning properly or effectively. So what are the predisposing factors? Remember, for bladder injury, I told you multiple cesarean sections, over distended bladder, obstructed labor, bladder being drawn up. But here, when you see, these are the predisposing factors. One is a large uterus. But if the uterus is uniformly large, say 18 weeks or 20 weeks, we call that as a PG case. That means it's a very simple case. There are no chances of ureteric injury or bladder injury. But if it is a cervical fibroid or broad ligament fibroid, you need to enucleate the fibroid separately before you apply the clamps. So cervical and broad ligament fibroid is a predisposing factor unless you have enucleated the fibroid. Large ovarian cyst, simple ovarian cyst which will just easily come out, there is no risk factor. But if it's adherent and staying inside, then it is a risk factor. Then most important in ureteric injury is the endometriosis. Endometriosis and pelvic inflammatory disease. I think I can hear a lot of disturbances. Okay. So endometriosis and pelvic inflammatory diseases provoke a lot of adhesions and alter the ureteric anatomy. So they are also prone for ureteric injury. And in a case of prosidentia, that is a stage 4 pelvic organ prolapse, where the entire uterus is outside, it drags the bladder and the ureters, which are dilated. So there is a risk of ureteric injury. So we tackle that by reducing it and keeping it sometime, putting a pessary, reducing the size, and then doing a hysterectomy. Any patient where you have a prior abdominal operations, advanced stage of malignancy, or anatomical anomalies of the urinary tract, or in short, altered anatomy. When you take up the case for surgery itself, the patient has got altered anatomy, then you counsel them that there is a possibility of a ureteric injury also. The endometriosis is now coming up. It's an increasing incidence of diseases. This endometrioma can involve either the ureter, either extrinsically, that is from outside, or intrinsically from inside. And long-standing endometriosis can cause intraperitoneal adhesions, making ureteric visualization difficult. This disease can deviate the ureters medially away from the normal anatomic position. So altered anatomy. So at least if you can remember these few words, PID can cause difficulty, endometriosis can cause problem. So this, can you see this bluish picture? These are all endometriotic spots. Okay. But what are the disturbing facts? I told you 1/3 of injuries only are recognized entire world. It is not, we're not talking about one hospital, Madras, Chennai, or anywhere. All over the world, bladder injuries are recognized on table, but ureteric injuries are very often missed unless we have a very high index of suspicion. And most lower, I gave you a list of so many high risk factors, no? Fibroids, PID, endometriosis, previous surgeries, etc., etc. But if you analyze the percentage of cases where ureteric injury happened, most lower urinary tract injuries occur during surgery performed for benign and otherwise uncomplicated conditions. Even that can happen, and most of them it has happened with uncomplicated cases. And most lower urinary tract injuries are not recognized during the operative procedures in which they occur. Only later on we recognize. What are the problems? Loss of renal function. If the ureter has been tied, totally the kidney can knock off. You may lose the kidney, or you can have, you tie it, but then it sloughs off and there is a urinary leakage seen. So it's a cause of a iatrogenic urinary fistula. And what we are worried, it is a very common cause of litigation. So this is a textbook picture which shows the common sites of ureteric injury, that is during the pelvic dissection of lymph nodes, ligation of gonadal vessels, ligation of uterine vessels, and dissection of the bladder, vagina, the common textbook picture. Again, these are also common textbook points, but you should know the 4 critical points of potential injury. One is at the point of entrance of the ureter in the pelvic bone when the ovarian vessels cross over it. Next to the uterosacral ligament at the level of the uterine artery, or where the ureter turns medially, crossing the anterior portion of the vaginal dome and entering the bladder wall. So how do we prevent this? Such a scary thing, we want to prevent it. So general prevention is a detailed history. You remember when I told you the causes, I was talking to you about PID, endometriosis. So any history suggestive of PID, endometriosis, or an nulliparous infertile lady, or a woman who has severe bleeding, think in terms of fibroid, etc. So you go for a detailed history of previous surgeries, previous malignancies, previous chemotherapy, any other surgeries, and do a thorough physical examination where you can see not only the size of the mass, how the uterus enlarged, is it irregular towards one side, how is the mobility, is there a restrictive mobility, and you do a pre-operative investigations like ultrasound and CT, which will assess the size of the uterus, the ovaries, the kidneys, etc. And then what are the specific prevention strategies? So in the general, I told you pre-operative imaging, ultrasound, and an IVU or CT scan. It can identify ureteric dilatation and disclose anatomical variation, but just because we have seen that, we may not prevent. We only know what it is, so we have to take care to prevent it. Okay, so and what is the role of preoperative retrograde catheterization or stenting? Supposing you know that this patient has stage 4 endometriosis, you're worried whether you want to stent them. Does stenting really helpful? We were doing for a few cases, but now we prefer to open dissect and see. So preoperative stenting has not been shown to reduce the incidence. The procedure itself may cause bleeding, edema, perforation of the ureter, and stent is often difficult to feel within an area of fibrosis and may predispose the ureter to damage as a result of the immobility it imparts to the ureter, may facilitate that. The only thing is, you put a stent, you cut the ureter, you will see the stent. So it will facilitate diagnosis. I told you only 1/3 of cases we know intra-op. Here, when you cut the ureter, if the stent is inside, you will be able to diagnose on table and it will help in the ureteric injury. What you need to remember is, one of the ways is putting a stent, but that is now people differ whether to put a stent or not. Okay, then what are the general preventive strategies intraoperatively? So intraoperatively, you need to have an adequate operative approach, appropriate operative approach, adequate exposure. You have to have a good exposure, good lighting, and when you have bleeding, in fact, many of the patients where there was no preoperative problem, but they've had injuries, when they retrospectively went and assessed why ureteric injury occurred, they have found that there was severe bleeding and blind clamping of the ureters. Just they put a clamp to try and avoid the bleeding has resulted in injury. So if there is a severe bleeding, don't panic. Pressure, packing, and prayers. You just give some time pressure and then slowly remove and see where it comes, and pointed you try to manage the bleeder. Don't put a blind clamp. In case the bleeding has extended into the retroperitoneum, you can open the retroperitoneum, visualize the ureter, visualize the vessels, and then take proper appropriate hemostatic measures. No blind clamping. That's that line also, avoid blind clamping of vessels. You nicely put pressure, packing, pressure, and prayers is what we say. So you give time for hemostasis and then slowly take off your pack. You will know where the bleeding comes and then tackle it correctly. Tackle it, not, put a blind clamp on the entire one. And in case I told you, you have some difficulty, you think it has extended into the retroperitoneum, open the retroperitoneum, see where it bleeds, and then properly damage. And similarly, whenever you are putting see, if you're going to do a vaginal hysterectomy, we push the bladder above, and with the bladder goes the ureter. Similarly, when you're doing abdominal procedure, you push the bladder from above downwards. And as the ureter moves away, the bladder moves, the ureter also goes away. And as you apply clamps, you don't apply large clamps. It's enough if you put short clamps. And similarly, when you're applying diathermy, don't diathemize large chunks. Let it be short diathermy applications. And during abdominal hysterectomy, the basic teaching we always tell them is clamp close to the uterus. If you clamp close to the uterus, you will generally avoid any ureteric injury. If it is a broad ligament fibroid or a cervical fibroid, you should enucleate the fibroid. Only then you will be able to clamp the uterus. So just this point, remember, you clamp close to the uterus and clamp the infundibulopelvic ligament near to the ovary after dissection and palpation. And whenever there's a slipped ligature, again, you have to be careful. Don't rush and blindly clamp. And never open the vagina unless the bladder is dissected downwards. And I was talking to you about intrafacial technique, that is removing the enucleating the cervical fibroid and the broad ligament fibroid. Never clamp, cut, ligate, or diathemize anything if you are not sure of what you are doing. If it's an altered anatomy, beware that ureter can come anywhere, unlike in the normal position. And normally there is no need for retroperitoneal exposure. But in case you're doubtful, you go and do an exposure and safeguard the course of the ureter. And when you're doing a vaginal hysterectomy, I told you, you put in a valsalem and cast a cervix. And when you push the bladder, again, you put a speculum and give a counter traction. It's safe. All clamps should be small bites. Again, repeatedly, I'm telling, clamps are close to the uterus. That one point will save the ureters. And vaginal oophorectomy, that is doing a salping oophorectomy from below, should be avoided if you are not trained enough for that. Or you have to do it carefully. Only thing, you have to be worried about slipped pedicle. So we have certain Satinski clamps which clamp the safely clamp. So you have to be careful while you do a vaginal oophorectomy. And in laparoscopy, again, the incidence is increasing. You have to make sure that the fallopian tubes are away from the pelvic side walls, and the bleeding points at uterosacral ligaments. Initially, this is when we started that we told them that we can put clips instead of electrocoagulation. Now we have safe energy sources. So the incidences of injury is coming down. But still, what we are worried in laparoscopy is, there is a lateral spread of the current. We apply clamps, we think we are close, but supposing there is a lateral spread of current, so inadvertently it can go closer to the ureter. Again, when you do an uterosacral ligament suspension, we have to be careful, but that's not for final years. And intraoperative management, if you detect, I told you again, it decreases the morbidity, again decreases the legal risks. Very difficult to intraoperatively diagnose. Most of us, you need to have a high index of suspicion. And you can properly diagnose if you're able to see the cut ends of the ureter or a urine flow. But again, if you have doubt, you do an exploration. You can give Lasix and look for peristalsis. And so what will you do? If there is a ligature, you remove the ligature and observe for viability. So think whether it is major or minor, you can stent. So for final years, if the ureteric injury you think is doubtful, you have to visualize and see. You can you should categorize whether it is minor or major. You can call the help of a urologist. You can stent if it's a small injury. If you think the viability is not good, it is better to open and do a open or laparoscopic and do a correct surgery. So if it is a partial transection, you can put a stent. If there's a complete transection but the length lost is very less, you can do a ureterocystostomy, ureteroneocystostomy without tension. But if it's a complete transection and there's more, you have to come for the next slides. So this is a slide which tells what we can do. Normally, for the gynecological ureteric injuries, we don't do a ureterostomy because the lower end of the ureter will be clamped in the vault. So we will not be able to dissect that. So we either do a ureteroneocystostomy, which is called a Litsch procedure, or if you think that it is not enough to do a tension-free anastomosis, you can take a psoas hitch, or you can do a Bovary's flap, which can bridge up to 12 to 15 centimeter. So what you need to remember is, in a case of ureteric injury, which is not, you are not able to make it all right by stenting, you can do a ureteroneocystostomy, or you can do a psoas hitch. You can take the bladder and I will show you the pictures, or you do a Bovary. If you name these procedures, at least it is enough. This is a case of transureterostomy, where if it almost goes above and you are not able to reach, you can bring the ureter from this side to here. Okay. This is one of my own patient where she had a bilateral ureteric injury and we brought this ureter to this side. Okay. And psoas picture. So I'm saying, can you remember? If the primary repair, why do we do a psoas hitch? If you are not able to bring that ureter and anastomose into the bladder. Ureteroneocystostomy means you are making cystostomy. You are making a small opening in the bladder and bringing that ureter and anastomosing into the bladder. But supposing you find that this anastomosis cannot be done tension free, then what you can do is, bladder, you mobilize it on both sides, lift the bladder and stitch it onto the psoas minor tendon or psoas major muscle. Now you can anastomose the ureter to the bladder. So can you see, you make a small opening, cystotomy, and bring the ureter. Can you see? Here, this picture, see, this is the one where they put a non-absorbable suture. They've elevated the bladder and stitched it to the psoas minor tendon. And this is a non-reflexing type of anastomosis. Normally, we prefer to do a reflexing anastomosis. As in adult urology, reflex is not a big thing. So can you see a picture after, this is an IVU after a psoas stitch. Can you see the bladder being nicely drawn up? It's stitched here. Otherwise, it is draining beautifully. Can you see? And now, supposing you have lifted up the bladder, even now you feel that the ureter cannot be anastomosed without tension. Then what you do is you take a Bovary flap. So what is a Bovary flap? Bovary flap is you take a tongue-like tissue from the bladder and lift it above, and then you convert it into a tube. So Bovary is a spiraled bladder flap which can bridge even a 10 to 15 centimeter ureteral defect. Almost up to the pelvis you can do. You ligate the contralateral pedicle, and this flap is based on the ipsilateral superior vesical artery. But even that, if you don't remember, that's okay for me. Can you see this picture? So this is the bladder. You take a small flap like this and you bring it up. So I made it up, and now you will convert this into a tubule. You will call it tubularization of the ureter. Can you understand? This is the whole thing is a bladder. On the anterior wall, I'm making a tongue-shaped flap. And now I'm bringing it this side. Can you see? And here I will convert this into a by suturing, we can tubularize it and connect it. And this hole again, you can suture with the bike rail. Okay. So again, see, this is another picture taking a tongue-shaped flap. Can you see they're inverting it and then suturing. Again, this is one of our picture. Can you see that this is the ureter? This is the ureter. Can you see? We're taking a big flap, a tongue-shaped flap, and then trying to anastomose. Can you see? See, this is a
Yes, ma'am.
ureteric catheter. So I have shown you how much of loss of the ureter we have anastomose. So even up to 15 centimeter, we can anastomose. So if there is a longer defect, you can take this is a flap from the bladder converted into a tube. So this portion again you can suture. Okay, bladder is a highly vascular organ, so it will heal beautifully. Okay, this is the final picture. So again, this is a picture of a Bovary flap. So what you need to remember is, if it is a small length of the ureter is lost, you can anastomose directly into the bladder. That is called a ureteroneocystotomy. If you think the length lost is more, you can lift the bladder to the psoas major tendon and do that's called a psoas hitch. If that is also not enough, you can take a flap from the bladder, which is called Bovary. If you tell this much, it is more than enough. If you still think that it is more, then you can put in a ileum. Or the other thing is, we try to bring the kidney. In all these 20 years, we have not done a renal decensus or a ileal interposition. Up to the Bovary, with Bovary itself, we will be able to manage almost all the patients. How will you diagnose a bilateral ligation? Bilateral ligation happens in a cervical fibroid if they have not done an enucleation. So the simple way would be that there is not even a drop of urine after the surgery. That's very easy. Anuria, total anuria. And how will you diagnose? An ultrasound. There will be bilateral pelvic axial dilatation, bilateral hydroureteronephrosis. If the parameters are normal, you can do an IVU or a CT scan. And if you think you cannot do anything immediately for the patient, you can put in a PCN. So what are the carry home points? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That means you have to have a detailed history taking right from her complaints. What are her presenting features? Examination. What is the abdomen looking like? Whether scars, size of the fibroid, mobility, whether there is procedentia. So, first history taking, examination, and then I told you about the investigations like ultrasound, IVU, etc., and surgery. Whatever said and done, careful, meticulous surgery. I told you about how you have a good operative exposure and how you plan for the surgery and do. That is very, very important. Prevention at all levels is very, very important. You should know the risk factors. Even though I have listed out the entire risk factors, you have seen many a times that injuries happen in persons without any risk factor also. So we have to be careful in everybody. Don't panic. If a surgeon has not injured a ureter in his lifetime, there are two things. Either they are telling lies or they have not done enough surgeries. So it does happen in everybody's life. So don't panic. Adequate exposure and what, and call for help. In case you think it is above your level of care, please call for help. And in many patients where I have seen, they will be extremely good surgeons, but the moment they encounter a bladder injury or a ureteric injury, they get panicky. So it is always safe in both their interest as well as in the interest of the patient to get help from your good colleagues and seniors. So what is the carry home message? In cesareans, I was talking of bladder injury. I told you about previous cesareans, late in labor, placenta previa, and also there was one slide which said over distended bladder. That is also a factor. And in these 20 years, I have seen bladder injuries happen in person where they've forgotten to put a catheter, or the catheter was put by a probationer where it was in the vagina and the bladder was distended. So in all pelvic surgeries, remember to have an empty bladder with the Foley, and open peritoneum with care at the most superior segment of the abdominal incision. Whenever you open, please beware that you are not sure of what the underlying structure is. You can have bowel, you can have bladder, you can have anything. So open peritoneum with care. That will be the single most important factor. And when I showed you that the relation with the bladder and the uterus, as talking to you about previous cesareans where it can get morbidly adherent, don't use gauze to push. Sharp dissection is better when the bladder is adherent. If there is an obstructed head or a big baby, instead of extending the lower incision, an inverted T-shaped incision will be better. You definitely need to be conscious of bladder and ureter, but the stress and anxiety will have a negative impact. When in doubt, use methylene blue. In bladder injuries, it will definitely be helpful for us to diagnose a bladder injury and also to breathe safely and happily that there is no bladder injury. Bladder injury patients tend to have more blood loss because of the mixture, and follow standard guidelines for prevention of ureteric injuries as I discussed. Prompt recognition and repair of injuries should be the main goal. Remember, 1/3 of ureteric injuries are only detected. So always, while you post-operatively, when you examine the patient and patient complains of a unilateral loin pain, so the unilateral loin pain is not normal. In most of the patients who come to us with ureterovaginal fistula on one side, they tell us clearly they had unilateral loin pain, which became all right after they started having leaking. So any post-operative complaint, I was telling you about good history taking, good clinical examination, good surgery, good post-operative care is also very important, because if at all some injury happens, you should be the person to recognize. So you have been vigilant. Injuring a bladder is not a crime. Is not a crime. No surgeon, gynecologist or urologist will go with a knife to injure. There is anatomic proximity. Everything is close by. We are dealing with that only. So it does happen. So you must be the person to recognize it also. Prompt recognition and repair of injuries should be the main goal. Failure to recognize a bladder or a ureteric injury is a venial sin, and to miss it or cover it up is much worse and is a mortal sin. So carry home message again. Another point is you have to be worried about the medico-legal complications, so that your history taking, your consent in cases of this, I told you, those with risk factors, you have to talk of bladder, bowel injury, etc. When the bladder injury amounting to medical negligence, when there is no abnormal anatomy or risk factor, but still bladder is injured, or is an unrecognized bladder injury. So if there is any doubt, if you've had any difficulty during surgery, at the end of the surgery, you tell the patient that there was a difficulty and there was an injury and sutured. It is not at all a crime, but you should document it. Complications are unavoidable. Injury is not uncommon. Remember, injury is not uncommon. In spite of being the best of the person, there can be an ureteric injury or bladder injury. Anticipation avoids injury. I grew up from KMC, where I dedicate the talk and my entire life to my training madams, Dr. Madhavi madam, Dr. Kalavati madam, Dr. Ayakame. We have had an entire host of people who taught us and trained us, where, they kept on telling that you don't have to look at the clock and operate. Greater speed will develop by methodical attention to details of technique and by avoiding unnecessary movements rather than hurrying up individual cases. There is no pride in saying, I will do skin to skin in 15 minutes. You take time. That doesn't mean you have to do a cesarean for 3 hours. Slowly, your speed will improve, but learn to do it the right way. The outcome is more important than the operative time. Thank you, and thanks for saving the ureter and the bladder. My best wishes to my students of Kilpauk Medical College. Whatever specialty you do, please remember the few points which I have tried to reinforce throughout your lifetime. Thank you. I would be
Sure,
happy
ma'am.
to
Thank you.
take questions, or in case you have any doubts also. I have given you my phone number. You can message and ask me. Any questions also, I would be okay to answer if we have time.
Thank
If
you so
there are,
much, ma'am.
yes, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you,
Thank
ma'am.
you. Thank you, ma'am. If you have any questions, you can ask me, you can message me. If you want any further suggestions also, you can tell us. Feel free to do so. Niraimuri, is it okay or do we continue?
Ma'am, we can end, ma'am.
Okay, ma. There are no
Yes,
questions, we will leave. Thank you,
yes,
ma.
ma'am.
Thank you
Thank
and
you
all
so
the
much,
best.
ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.